Hello yellow jello people, Thunder here, and today we're doing another death battle related video because I had this idea. Now that season 9 is on break, I decided I'm going to try and predict the next season. Well, not really predict. This is just making a somewhat realistic death battle season consisting of episodes I could actually see them doing. But because of that, there's a few rules. Rule 1, we're doing 16 episodes divided into 8 sprite fights, 4 blender fights, 2 3D fights that aren't blender, and 2 hand-drawn fights. You may say 2 hand-drawn seems kind of unrealistic. You'll understand why I think it would work. Plus season 8 did it. Also, there is like one fight that could work in live action. So, actually there's 2 fights that could work in live action. So you can replace one of the blender slots with live action and make that different season list. Every season has had 6 confirmed combatants ever since season 7, and it fall under Star Wars, Marvel, video game, and 2 anime, with season 9 having a third anime instead of cartoon. But we're going with the cartoon because it diversifies things a little. And if we're going realistic, every season has had Marvel and DC, meaning a realistic season has Marvel and DC. So we're going with 2 Marvel versus DC, 1 Marvel versus non-DC, and 1 DC versus non-Marvel. Well, I mean, 1 Marvel would already have to be with the confirmed combatant rules, but anyway. So, let's get started by going into what the 6 confirmed combatants would be, assuming this is a real season. Palpatine, Kazuma, Bill Cipher, Ego, Guts, and Monokuma. I don't have really anything to say about these because we're going to talk about them during the episode, starting with the season premiere. And for a season premiere, I think they've done like sprite fights as season premieres, and they've done 3D fights as season premieres. The only animation style they haven't done as a season premiere is hand-drawn. And season premieres are always confirmed combatants, and seeing this list, you can guess what the season premiere is. It's Discord versus Bill Cipher. They're like the super crazy, the reality warpers from 2 different worlds, and it bring in Gravity Falls, and Bill Cipher is probably the most fitting character from that series to use, and it would give them My Little Pony episode in which they don't have to worry about Boomster complaining about ponies all along. It's a highly requested matchup. Would work well at premiere. And again, if you're worried about 2 hand-drawn slots, you could even have it be in like for reality swapping, like Saitama Popeye have it sectioned in sprites or sectioned in 3D. Sprites probably works better, or considering reality warping is what these 2 do. So hell, it could even be a nice fake out with the teaser, the sneak peek, where at the beginning of the fight and sprites, so people see and like, man, I wish it was hand-drawn, and then when the fight actually comes out, the rest of it is hand-drawn. As a little joke. As for who I think I win, I'm pretty sure it's Bill. I've heard both sides though, so I don't know. Next up, every season always does 2 confirmed combatants in a row, like Miles and Sindel. Yoda and then Ryuko, Jinx and then Scarlet Witch. So we're doing Bill Cipher, and next would be Kazuma versus Subaru. Brings in 2 new franchises, and not just that, brings in a brand new sub-genre of anime of the isekais. And Konosuba and ReZero are probably the 2 biggest isekai behind Sword Art Online. Like definitely, like, if you probably ask someone who knows what isekai are, they'd probably say these 2 or Sword Art Online. Probably more Sword Art Online. But if we're gonna get an isekai fight between 2 isekai characters, I feel like this is a great place to start. From what I get, this would be a sprite fight, and from what I guess, is Subaru wins because he can resurrect without needing outside help, unlike Kazuma. And if that is the case, an interesting way would be have a death where both of them die, but because Subaru comes back while Kazuma doesn't, that gives him the win. I just think it'd be cool to get a isekai fight, get like a new thing. It'd be a pretty different fight compared to the rest, especially considering most anime fights are super over the top, and these guys are kind of more treated as jokes. At least Kazuma is. Yes. So I just think it'd be nice. For the next episode, we're doing a fighting game episode, because every season has had one. Well, season 9 hasn't had one, but that's the season not finished, and it's probably gonna have one in the second half of the season. But the thing is, what franchise could we use? Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter are used very often, so let's give another franchise a shot. But like we had Darkstalkers in season 7, King of Fighters and Tekken in season 8. There's a fighting game rivalry they've only done once: Blazblue versus Guilty Gear. And whilst I could do a remake of Ragnar vs. Soul, or I could do a Iron Tiger vs. Potemkin, or Chips and Up versus Banks Isagami, we all know if they're doing a second in Guilty Gear vs. Blazblue, it's Jin versus Kai. Kiske? I don't know how to pronounce it. They're the law enforcement members that are the rivals of the Red Clad protagonists of their series. And the rivalry between Blazblue and Guilty Gear that already exists. Leads into a more interesting anime fighting game episode, considering every fighting game episode has been more traditional. These are more anime fighters, so it would lead to a more interesting fighting game episode compared to the more recent ones. Plus, both Blazblue and Guilty Gear haven't had an episode since the original Ragnar vs. Soul in season 2. Oh, both of these series deserve to have more episodes than just 1 for Guilty Gear and 2 for Blazblue. Oh, and I feel like this is a good episode to bring both series back in. It's not like they aren't popular. Guilty Gear Strife was a huge hit. This would be another Sprite fight, and based on, I'm pretty sure Soul still collectively agreed to be the winner of that. I imagine that Kai also wins that, considering they're the rivals of the main character. They're comparable to each other. Like Soul's comparable to Kai and Jin's comparable to Ragnar. So, yeah. For our next one, another Sprite fight, we have Shifu versus Splinter. Well, Splinter versus Shifu, actually. I messed up the order thing. This is her Sprite fight because, I know like they did as a death battle cast. I know a lot of people really want this. And the thing they would never do that until they use Poe, but now they have used Poe. So there's no reason for them not to do it. They literally talked about wanting to do it and how interesting it would be. Plus, Kung Fu Panda has only been on the show once, so as yes it was recently, it'd still be nice to see a second fight. And they haven't used a new Ninja Turtle character since season 4 with Shredder. They got Leonardo in season 7, but he had already had 2 episodes before that. So bringing in a new Ninja Turtle character, Splinter makes the most sense, and Shifu is probably his most popular opponent. And this team shows interest in. A lot of fans like it. I like it. Splinter wins, despite the fact that he didn't win the Death Battle cast. Again, just be a Sprite fight. We've gone 4 episodes without having any cape shit. Let's change that. It's Ego versus Mogo. See, the thing I love about this fight is the fact that it's the most generic Marvel versus DC characters that people barely care about. But it's also super interesting because they are like living planets. That is a completely different thing than every other Marvel vs. DC fight. I imagine this be done in in-house 3D, right? Considering I imagine especially I imagine could they do a really nice job with the lantern construct. I'm pretty sure Ego does have a pretty wide arsenal of powers, and Mogo is a lantern. You could put a lantern against someone who has 0 powers and it'd still have immense fight potential. I want to see them weaponize their ecosystems. I love to see a recreation of the scene from Ben vs. Hal where Hal uses the big gloves against Way Big, but against Ego punching Mogo. Mogo punching Ego in the face. I know that Ego can recreate like human forms in the movies at least. So if he can do that in the comics too, maybe have an interesting scene where Ego creates a human version of himself, and Mogo creates a Green Lantern construct of like John Stewart or one of the other Green Lanterns, and they have like a human-sized fight whilst the planets are fighting in the background. Ego wins, so, and considering his thing is eating planets and stars, of course he'd need to kill Mogo by eating him. Yeah, I just think this would be an interesting fight, and it's one of the 4 fights I think the aren't have a chance of making this video outdated by happening in the second half of the season. But it's not a Death Battle season without 2 Marvel or Class DC fights back to back. It's Captain America versus Kamen Rider Ichigo. Oh, this was one of the 2 fights I say could be done in live action, considering Kamen Rider is a show that is in live action, and Captain America is in the movies, and he's one more grounded character. They did Daredevil, they did Red Hood, they did all those guys in live action. They can do Captain America. The only problem would be if they want to give him Mjolnir. Yeah. Also, apparently Kamen Rider Ichigo wins, which is based. But if we're not doing live action, this would be a sprite fight, considering I imagine that'd be better than the Blender, or for these two, considering they're more grounded and martial arts, and Blender has not done that well with martial arts, so sprites works best. Captain America is also the character that deserves to come back the most out of all the comic book characters. Well, excluding Spawn, but out of the Marvel and DC side, absolutely. Spider-Man with contention, but we already got Miles Morales, Spider-Gwen, 29-9 and all that, so we don't really need Peter Parker to return. We've only gotten Captain America against fighting Batman, and that episode wasn't good, so giving Cat a modern good episode would be pretty based, and bringing in Kamen Rider would be equally as based. Now let's get to another episode that is unrealistic, but I'm putting in here because I'm annoying. It's Kirby versus Ditto. I already talked about this last time, but I wanted to talk more about it. Because I just like it. I just have many ideas for this. Considering the problem with Kirby vs. Ditto is that when you see Kirby vs. Ditto, people just think Ditto transform into Kirby and the fight will just be 2 Kirbys. But when I think about Kirby vs. Ditto, I think about Kirby using all his copy abilities, whilst Ditto is using all his different transformations into different Pokemon. Have like Kirby try to inhale Ditto, but Ditto transform into one of the larger Pokemon like Snorlax or Golem, to block Kirby from inhaling him. Considering whilst Kirby can inhale big objects, not that easily. Then have Ditto transform into a Machamp, but in Kirby transform into Fighter to have a cool fighting thing, like a JoJo's Stand Rush clash. Have Ditto transform into an Ice type Pokemon, and Kirby transform into a Fire type to have a Beam clash between Fire and Ice. Have Kirby go in to threaten Ditto with Sword or something, but then Ditto transform into Magikarp and jumps into millions of feet in the air, like how he says in the Dex entry, but then it transforms into a Snorlax or another super heavy Pokemon like Copperajah or something to fall and crush Kirby, but Kirby inhales a nearby fighting type that gives us suplex, and then he grabs it, Ditto, and pile drives him to the ground. Of course, the climax would be either Kirby versus Kirby with Ditto transforming, or Kirby versus one of the legendary Pokemon like Arceus or Giratina. And Kirby probably still wins, but I feel like a sprite fight with this much greater potential, considering most of these Pokemon have sprites they could use, would be great. Plus, when listening to the series, it would say Kirby versus Pokemon and that's technically accurate to what the fight actually is, considering it's technically Kirby versus every Pokemon. And for the mid-season finale, we're going with another one of the confirmed combatants, considering we've only gone with 3 of them so far. And it's Palpatine versus Xehanort. When it comes to a Star Wars fight, there's 5 characters that came to mind: Han Solo, Mandalorian, Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and Palpatine. Luke Skywalker is most likely bringing back him for Harry, and whilst I think that is a remake episode that deserves to happen, I don't care about it. Han Solo is not happening until Star Trek does something, or Han Solo is the main focus, which means it's never happening. And we just had Boba Fett, so that left us with Palpatine and Vader. With really, Either our evil version of Luke versus Harry with Palpatine versus Voldemort, evil version of Yoda King Mickey with this matchup, or evil version of Obi-Wan Kakashi with Darth Vader Obito. The reason I picked with this one, because they've already did this as a DBX, and if this was season 10, hypothetical season 10, and it would be 2 seasons after they did it as a DBX, just like how it happened with for Vegeta. So it is precedented for them to do an episode like this after the DBX. And 2, because I prefer for Vader's saber from Fate. 8, but that's unrealistic. Whilst this was way more likely to actually happen. And just because the DBX already happened and already covered a bunch of their stuff, doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't have still a bunch of fight potential they could do. An idea that I like is having the fight take place in the Keyblade Graveyard, and then have Palpatine use the Force to move all the Keyblades to do like the Keyblade riding attack that Sora can do in one of his forms. That would be an interesting way to take the direction a different way. Plus, it would allow us to have Palpatine use a Keyblade himself during the fight, which would include some interesting ideas. But Xehanort still wins, though. Oh, have you seen its stat gap in Yoda King Mickey? It's that, but maybe bigger considering Yoda. I'm pretty sure Xehanort's even more powerful. Well, especially at full power of the X-Blade, Keyblade. And I feel like this would be a great Blender episode to end off the season. First off, anyway. To return to this season, we'd use another confirmed combatant in a in-house 3D fight, that is Dimitri versus Guts. They've talked about wanting to use Fire Emblem, and Fire Emblem's Three Houses is about to be on its way out thanks to Three Hopes and the rumored new Fire Emblem game that looks like Ruby. I really hope that there's actual plot connection between that and Ruby so that can be an actual matchup that they might do. And they've talked about wanting to bring Guts back. This and Palpatine's Xehanort are 2 episodes that I'm also confident in not happening in the second half of the season. Well, not because of the fact that they aren't going to happen. In fact, I think Guts returning and Palpatine's Xehanort are very likely episodes to happen. But not this season, because they've already talked about... Because they've already used the Star Wars and they are talking about how they want to bring Guts back, which implies they aren't currently doing so. Well, as for why I picked Dimitri, again, they want to use Fire Emblem. Three Houses is about to be on its way out, meaning this is a perfect time to use him. And it brings back Guts, which is a very popular character. We haven't seen not only just him, but his franchise since Season 2. Just like how I talked about Guilty Gear and BlazBlue. So, new franchise versus franchise we haven't seen in a while. With a character that a lot of people really like, and a character from a new series that also a lot of people really like. In a matchup that probably isn't Guts' best, it's the one that intrigues the most, considering I don't know Claire from Claymore. And I don't care about Guts versus Ike, which is his other Fire Emblem opponent. Plus, to me, again, Fire Emblem Three Houses makes more sense than Ike. And I think this would be a 3D fight because when they talked about Guts, they talked about wanting to do it in 3D to ratio the actual Berserk 3D, so... And you know what? It took a while for us to get into the cape shit last time. Now that we're in the mid-season return, let's go in immediately. It's Jiren versus Atrocitus. This was actually in contested between 3 slots for the DC versus non-Marvel. This, John Constantine versus Raido, and Catra versus Cheetah. Cheetah? I forget how it's pronounced. The Wonder Woman lady. Cat girl, the Wonder Woman leopard girl that fight, yeah. I was thinking about Catra versus Cheetah because I realized I didn't have any female FC episodes, but realistically, Ego Mogo and Kirby Ditto are never happening, so just replace those 2 with female themed episodes. And I think a Dragon Ball fight is somehow even more important, and as I definitely prefer Yonko Raido, again, we're doing semi-realistic. This is Dragon Ball fight. Right, and we wouldn't have one if I didn't pick this. There are rumors that might happen this season, which might make this video outdated by the time you're watching it, but I don't care. It's a fight that is I don't think anybody really wants, but I don't think that anybody's would be so pissed that I would absolutely hate it happening. I don't hate it happening because I like Lantern characters and like seeing people be pissed about the correct result of Atrocitus winning. This is a interesting case where if you do the Cap versus Ichigo in live action, then you do this in Sprites, but if you don't do that, then you do this in Blender. Which does mean that we have two 3D Lantern fights in the same season, but I don't care. Next up, we're covering the final confirmed combatant that we haven't done yet. It's Monokuma versus Koro-Sensei. Hey. Monokuma had two options for me to pick. Teddy, which comes from a game that I've played and love, franchise that I love, Persona, and Koro-Sensei comes from an anime that I've never watched but heard good things about and probably will get to watching one day. Maybe. I picked Koro-Sensei because it's the fairer fight, and also, out of all Persona characters to bring in after Mitsuru, Teddy, I'd much rather them do Chi versus Mako, or Yosuke versus Josuke, or Persona 6 protagonist versus Jolene, or Kira versus Adachi, or hell, even Joker versus Giorno. No, maybe not Persona 6 protagonist versus Jolene, actually, because that's an even bigger stomp. These are the teachers of schools relating to killing, where one doesn't teach to kill but heavily encourages it, while one does teach to kill but doesn't discourages it. It's way fairer again for Monokuma than it is for Teddy. In fact, I think that he might actually win, considering I know Koro-Sensei is super weak defensively most of the time, and he relies on evading a lot more, and Monokuma has a giant army of himself. Oh, so that might actually make Monokuma the victor. Of course, if Monokuma does win, it has to end in execution with him dragging Koro-Sensei, saying restriction. Also, the setup of the fight has a pretty easy way. Monokuma tries to drag the kids from Assassination classroom into a killing game, and Koro-Sensei's like, no you don't. Considering his role is to protect those kids. It's interesting episode. We're bringing Danganronpa, and Monokuma is the most fitting character to bring Danganronpa with. Plus, Assassination Classroom is another series I know a lot of people really like and would love to see Danganronpa Death Battle talk about. And now next comes up the next other fight that I think works well in live action, but I think works better in Blender. Gandalf versus Dumbledore. Or not, is the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter are franchises I always associate with each other, but I'm not sure if that's just me or if that is actually the general consensus of the two franchises are associated. I know these two definitely are. Or so it is kind of a legacy fight, and having these wizard battles showing a bunch of fancy spells and with Blender would be neat. Harry Potter is another series we haven't seen for a while, since Season 1, and Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth we haven't seen at all. We all know that the episode would be said Lord of the Rings, despite the fact that the franchise is technically called Middle-earth. If Dumbledore loses and Gandalf wins, which is based considering J.K. Rowling is cringe. And some people may say that they shouldn't do this episode because J.K. Rowling is cringe, but they've done other episodes with characters created by horrible people, so I don't see why Harry Potter has to have only one bad episode in Season 1. Well, I feel like bringing back at least a few more times is okay. Right? Plus, it gives Gandalf a win. Next up, we have the final Marvel vs. DC fight. Mysterio versus Scarecrow. The illusion using gas having enemies to Spider-Man and Batman. They probably have better for each other, but the fight potential is what makes people really like this, including myself. You have a character that relies on illusions and a character that relies on Atrocitus that makes you see things. That literally gives you practically infinite fight potential in a way that isn't like Scarlet Satana, where they have so many powers that you think that it's underwhelming, because since anything you'll do with illusions is using all their powers. An idea I had for this is have it take place in a mall, because then you can have things like Scarecrow hitting Mysterio into an elevator and causing the fear toxin make him think that it's falling, considering falling elevator is a common fear. or Mysterio hitting Scarecrow into a toy store and using his illusions to make the toys come to life and attack Scarecrow. Plus it'd probably give a good setup for the fight, considering there's Mysterio is a former movie effect artist, so you could have him do some kind of performance, or maybe he's watching one of the movies Mysterio works on, insults it, and Mysterio pick a fight because of that. Kind of like a villain version of Scarlet vs. Zatanna. This would be a sprite fight, and I think Mysterio wins because he has a stupid fishbowl for a head that wouldn't allow the gas to get into it. And next up would be another sprite fight. You know what, a series I like, and I know the people at Death Battle like? JoJo's. You know, a franchise that they've used only once. I also know that people at Death Battle like Yu Yu Hakusho. Well, it's Okuyasu vs. Kuwabara. I don't know anything about Yu Yu other than what they talked about during the one Yu Yu episode they did do. But I do know JoJo's. So my guess is that these are the Pompadour having, Soma for Okuyasu, so best friends of the protagonists that are immensely powerful but are too stupid to realize how to use their powers correctly. And that seems like a great dynamic. Another reason I like this fight is because from what I've heard, Kuwabara has every advantage apart from like speed or something, but he still loses because Okuyasu could just erase him. And he can do nothing about it. And if so that's the case and they make Okuyasu win, I would love it for it to be that there's a super tense finisher. The two of them are like about to thing, going all out, and Okuyasu just says, hey, I could just erase you, and does so, and that's how the fight ends, in a anti-climax, which was, yes, I do understand, would probably paint Kuwabara as a kind of a bitch for dying so easily, and Okuyasu could have ended the fight immediately if he'd just been smart. Considering Kuwabara, I'm pretty sure, is also treated as a joke, and that is a joke, and that is the truth of the fight. Well, I makes me like this episode. Or if Kuwabara wins, they could have it so that he, after he killed Okuyasu, he says he does realize that he could have just erased me this whole time, does he? Doesn't he? And this is the last sprite fight of the season. We have 2 more fights to go. People have always said they want to see the Blender team do a gunfight. And whilst I don't have Master Chief vs. Doom Guy remake here or any other ones, I have Master Chief or Doom Guy fights. I have Medic vs. Richtofen. Been bringing back TF2, bringing in Call of Duty. And I know some people are gonna say Call of Duty's cringe. Oh, let me listen here. I literally grew up in the mid 2000s when Call of Duty was popular. Well, not mid 2000s, early 2010s more like. And still Call of Duty was popular, especially here in Brazil. And I was the one kid that never played it because I thought, oh no, the age rating is too high for me. I can't play that. So if anyone would have an opinion that Call of Duty is cringe, it would be me. But no. I actually won Call of Duty on Death Battle because I want to learn more about it. I am the 2000s kid that didn't play Call of Duty. Of course I want to learn more about it to be able to actually interact with people and talk about it. And this is the most interesting Call of Duty matchup that's come to me. Technically it's Call of Duty Zombies specifically, but you get the point. Plus TF2 is great. I've played it a bit. My computer hates it when I do, but I've had fun doing so. Oh, and Medic's personality is great. He has the soul of everyone. I wonder if that helps him win the fight. I'm pretty sure it doesn't, considering I heard Call of Duty Zombies is surprisingly overpowered. Especially compared to TF2. And now, before we get into this final fight, I want to say something. The finales, I split into 2 categories. Well, not split 2 categories, more like a sliding scale. The ones leaning more towards the matchup having a huge legacy, and it being more of a spectacle. We have the 2 first seasons with matchups that are immense. Goku vs. Superman and Pokemon vs. Digimon. And we have other seasons like Thanos vs. Darkseid for 5, and Hulk vs. Broly for 7. Which definitely do have major legacy, but do lean more towards the spectacle side. Oma vs. My Guy, Silverger vs. Sephiroth, and Saitama vs. Popeye are all great episodes, Those exclude the weird Virgil scaling. But they definitely are more about the spectacle their fights bring rather than their matchups. Then there's Deadpool vs. Pinkie Pie, but ignore that. That was supposed to be Power Rangers Voltron, which would definitely fall under the big legacy side of fights. And we haven't had a big legacy fight outside of the finale. And I'm actually going with a confirmed fight. Right? But not the one that people think when you think confirmed fight finale. Which, if you know what the 4 confirmed battles are, you know what this means. People always talk about Guys vs. Unicron, plus the slots for hand-drawn, and that wouldn't really make much sense. Wiz vs. Boomstick is the series finale, and I'm not making that. So that only leaves 2 options. Rue vs. Maka, and the one that's actually it, Mickey Mouse vs. Bugs Bunny. It's a massive legacy fight about 2 characters that can do practically anything, and people never talk about using it as a finale when they could literally do anything, and having the heightened budget of a finale would allow this fight to flourish even more with all the Tomb Force shenanigans that they would be able to do. Also, this is the reason why a hand-drawn fight had 2 hand-drawn slots. One is the premiere and one is the finale. They literally have the entire season to work between these. And these two have lots to work with, and so much so that I could go on and on about ideas you could do. But here are some ideas. Have the classic trope of objects falling, but they keep one-upping each other, and similar other cartoon tropes. For example, Bugs causes a giant rock to fall on Mickey, but Mickey, whilst under the giant rock, causes a piano to fall on Bugs. But then Bugs causes an anvil to fall on Mickey. And then Mickey causes some giant dinosaur foot or regular foot to stomp on top of the piano Bugs is in. Or maybe if they give Mickey the things from Kingdom Hearts, despite the fact they already used King Mickey as a separate character, have a scene where Mickey pulls out the Keyblade and Bugs changes the scenery to look like Yoda versus King Mickey, and they have a shot that references Yoda King Mickey. Maybe even have Mickey kill Bugs with Ultima, but then Bugs comes back like how Yoda did, but this time it's real and the fight continues, considering Bugs can actually come back. And of course, Mickey would get a chance where he comes back from the dead too. And the fight ends with the one finally finding out how to erase the other for good. Bugs probably wins considering he has way wackier toon shenanigans, but I think that this is a matchup that people never talk about as a finale, and I think people should talk more about it as a finale. And one benefit of this season is that it not only brings in a bunch of new franchises, but also brings back a bunch of franchises that only ever got 1 episode. In terms of new franchises, we have Gravity Falls, Konosuba, Re:Zero, Kamen Rider, Fire Emblem, Danganronpa, Assassination Classroom, Lord of the Rings, Last Middle Earth, Call of Duty, and Looney Tunes. A total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 franchises. And in terms of franchises that have only had 1 episode before this, Guilty Gear, Kung Fu Panda, Berserk, I think I spelled wrong, Harry Potter, Yu-Gi-Oh! Hakusho, Team Fortress 2, and Mickey Mouse, or just general Disney. They've only had 1 episode up until this season, and I think that's something people don't talk about as much. They always focus about, I want to see new franchises come to Death Battle, but never say, oh, all these franchises they've only used once, that still have a lot of matches they could do. They never bring those up. When they have just as much warranty coming back to Death Battle as new franchises do coming into Death Battle for the first time. And I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye! Oh God.